think that Israel really is at a loss. And I kind of do blame it on our leadership for not being realistic, for not setting realistic expectations in this war, for not explaining what is possible and how that would be achieved, for pretty much almost lying to us for the last 18 months, making us believe that there's some military solution to Gaza.
That familiar voice is Katz, a good friend of the State of Tel Aviv podcast, and he's back, as you can hear, after a somewhat prolonged absence. And Yaakov, as am I, is as concerned as ever with the state of political life in this country, which, of course, influences everything. Security, national cohesion and morale. And when someone of Yaakov's stature and depth of knowledge and understanding makes such a sharp comment as you just heard, then I suggest that we must all snap to attention. Israel is in a very dire situation, and not just militarily. We get into the newly announced Gaza operation that will likely begin mid-May after President Trump leaves the region. He's a planned visit. There is another call-up of tens of thousands of reservists to serve in that planned offensive. We talk about the deep war weariness in Israel, the worry, and of course, the fate of the hostages. We always speak of the hostages. And Yemen. We get to Yemen at the end. And how could I forget the Houthis, who scored a direct hit just a few days ago on Ben Gurion International Airport. For the last couple of months, both Yaakov and I have been traveling a lot, extremely busy, and of course, in the middle of all that was the Passover pause. So we got knocked off our rhythm a little, but we're back. And I look forward to hosting him regularly on the podcast. I missed his clarity, his passion, and his powerful analysis, and I know that many State of Tel Aviv regulars and subscribers feel similarly. So I'm delighted to turn it over now to the amazing, redoubtable Yaakov Katz. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Stay with us. 8 p.m., Tuesday, May 6th. It's been a long time. How the heck are you, Yaakov?
So much has changed. I don't know where to begin.
Well, maybe we should just end it now. Because, by tomorrow when I run this, it's all going to be outdated anyhow. I just have to point out to our viewers that Yaakov is not the host, but he does have better lighting today because I just moved and my lighting isn't set up and
you look great.
Tough. Thanks, Yaakov. I appreciate that. I just wanted to make that point that it's a tough one to swallow to be upstaged by your guest, but I can take it. I can take it with you. You're maybe the only person. So we got a lot going on. I've been away. You've been away. Everybody's back. Holidays are over and things are busy. It's kind of hard to know where to begin, but we always do. And so let's start, shall we? With, what do you say, Gaza?
Good choice.
We're in this very bizarre place. We know that over the course of the last week, call-up notices have gone out to tens of thousands of Israelis to show up for reserve duty in the Gaza Strip yet again. And there are a lot of questions around what they're going to be doing. What is this planned operation? What is it intended to accomplish? So let's just start from the beginning, I guess, which is the cabinet has made a decision that Israel will deploy the IDF back into the Gaza Strip in what they're calling a kind of renewed and very intense ground assault and operation. What more can you tell us?
Look, Israel, and we've spoken about this a lot over the last 18 months, but Israel is at this point once again in the operation where it feels that it has done a lot and it has done a lot, where it's fought a lot, it's invested a lot of resources, it's put a lot of soldiers on the ground, and it's also paid with the painful price of losing soldiers as well as hostages who continue to languish. And as the days go by, their lives are in peril, and some of them are killed. We've lost a lot of international legitimacy over the last 18 months. I'm not sure how much is actually left. But with that said, we still have a genuine problem. And that is that Hamas is still standing. Hamas still has capabilities. Hamas has apparently replenished its ranks with another 20, 30,000 fighters. We're now told that, contrary to what we were told midway through the war, that maybe at the best case scenario, Israel has destroyed 40 to maybe, if we're lucky, 50% of the tunnels. So there's still a hell of a lot left. And how do we end this? And how do we win? And what does a victory look like? And the prime minister promised us a victory just a year ago. He said, we're a step away from the victory. Well, we're a year later, and that victory is nowhere to be found. So I think that you have the genuine dilemma of what do? You can't get back the hostages. You're not defeating Hamas. And you have this political pressure that the prime minister definitely faces from his coalition partners who are breathing down his neck, who are saying, you got to go and you got to be even tougher, right? Now, I know people around the world, and you know this just as well as I do. People hear tougher, more aggressive, and they're like, what did you just do for the last 18 months? So what does that mean, tougher, more aggressive than what you've been doing?
Yeah, and if I can be a little reductionist, like, what's the plan? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that it was in November when Prime Minister Netanyahu was telling us, we've won, we've crushed Hamas. We were hearing very high numbers, so that 90% of their actual fighting force, in terms of, human force, had been destroyed, and significant amounts of their weapons, tunnels, everything. And as you point out, well, maybe not. And then shortly after that, November, we start hearing reports of, well, Hamas is replenishing its strength. It's recruiting new recruits. It's a large population. There are lots of young men coming up, and they haven't got much else to do there. So, and here we are. And it feels like, just as you said, it's almost as if we've been standing still. So we're going back in. The talk around this particular campaign is very aggressive, right? Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, one of the hardliners in the coalition, is saying, this time we're going in, we're going to occupy Gaza, we're going to settle Gaza.
And we're not leaving Gaza, even if there's going to be a deal that is on the table to get back the hostages, which of course is getting a lot of people upset. Look, I think that Israel really is at a loss. And I kind of do blame it on our leadership for not being realistic, for not setting realistic expectations in this war, for not explaining what is possible and how that would be achieved, for pretty much almost lying to us for the last 18 months, making us believe that there's some military solution to Gaza.
Right.
When really, I know, and pretty much everyone knows that the military can only do so much. The rest is political courage, leadership, and an alternative governing entity in the Gaza Strip, which this government refuses to even engage in those conversations and talk about what that will look like. And therefore we're being misled to some extent. But there are ways that this will look different, right? One of the main ways, and just to give an example, Israel has done a lot of damage to Gaza. It's destroyed, apparently, according to the UN, 40 to 50% of all buildings there. There's about 50,000 people who are reported to have been killed. They claim most of them are civilians. We claim that probably at least half, or if not a third, are combatants. But what can be done more is, if you go back to the beginning of the war and the ground offensive, Israel went in from the north and kind of left the south untouched.
Right.
Then when it finished with the north, it went to the south. It was playing this like kind of ping pong game of sorts with the civilian population in Gaza. And I hate to use that term, it doesn't sound good, but the idea basically was, we want to create sterile environments and areas for operations. So we're going to push everyone, drop leaflets, robocall, you name it, get everyone from the north to move to the south, operate in the north, even though we know that the Hamas guys are also fleeing to the south, but we said, okay, we'll do that at the risk of, we want to minimize civilian casualties. Then they went into the south. They tried to push them to other areas. There was always this, remember, Rafah, the whole thing about Rafah with the Biden administration. It's going to be a disaster. All that stuff, and it wasn't, but whatever. Here, I think one of the ways they'll do it aggressively is they'll go in all at once, right? This will be all into Gaza, flood the place, real shock and awe, massive firepower, very aggressive on the ground, very quick, lots of force, but every possible direction at once.
So flood the place to what end?
Viv, I don't know. I mean, don't know. That's what. Listen, I was talking with someone today, and they said to me, they were hearing what I had to say, and they said, well, if based on what you're saying, if that's true, then if I'm a reservist, why would I want to go to the army? And I recognize that, right? I recognize that this is a little, uninspiring, or it takes away from the motivation but at the end, I don't know what the answer is, because these are the questions that I'm dealing with, and I'm trying to understand what is the government's plan. And for 18 months, I've been hearing from the powers that be, from the prime minister and down, that there is some plan, but we can't share it. And everyone who I talk to doesn't know what the plan is and doesn't want to share it. And none of our allies know what the plan is. I just don't think there's a plan. And that has me deeply concerned.
And I think a lot of people are deeply concerned. This is a very different country than it was 18 months ago when, there was this crisis, really an existential crisis, a deep concern that Hezbollah and Iran might jump into the conflict. And the enlistment of reservists was something like 150%, as I recall. People didn't even wait to be called up. They jumped on planes, came from overseas, returned from their long trips that they were taking post-army to make it to their base in time. I was speaking with someone just yesterday who was telling me that the response number for reserve call-ups this round so far is 102%. Still sounds pretty good, but it's not 150. And one of the people I was speaking to is my kind of sofa upholstery cleaner guy who was in the other day because I just moved. And, he's a dad of a young child. He did over 6 months of reserve duty. He runs his own business. If he's not there cleaning the upholstery, no one's running the business. There's no income coming in. And he said, I just got my call up again. I don't know what to do. And there are like tens of thousands of guys like him.
Yeah.
Who were in this real predicament. And he and I had very similar conversation to the one that you and I just had. And he said, why am I going? I understood before, but I don't understand now. And I think that we are facing so many crises, but the crisis within, and this is a new one, of a real questioning of the leadership and saying, you're asking us to put our lives on the line again. What's the plan, man? I mean,
and I think that these are all very legitimate and important questions that need to be asked. And let me, by the way, let me just add to this the fact that as they're calling up these thousands, tens of thousands of reservists, the Knesset is beginning its summer session, during which the most important goal and legislative bill on their agenda that they want to pass is the draft exemption law for the ultra-Orthodox. So at the same time that the government is calling up tens of thousands of people like your upholster guy, regular Israelis, I think people don't understand, by the way. I think that people around the world, and I don't blame them, but I think they don't understand what it means to be a miluimnik and what reserve duty does. I did not serve in reserves in this war. I finished up when I hit 39. They kicked me out of my unit before I even hit 40. That was already 6-7 years ago. So I've been out for too long. But I remember even in my day when there wasn't a war, you're doing your work, you're living with your family, you're married, you got kids, you're not, whatever. In my case, I did. And suddenly you get a letter one day in the mail that tells you that in about 2 months, for 3 weeks, you're going all the way down to the Egyptian border. It kind of sucks, right? Now, take that and fast forward to now, where you have people who, high-tech workers, doctors, lawyers, plumbers, upholsterers of couches, you name it, all walks of life. They're taken not for just 3 weeks. They're taken for 3 to 4 months, if not longer. They're taken for 100, 200 days. They've already done 100 days, and now they're being told they're going to do another 200 days, whatever it is. This is extreme. And at the same time that this is happening, you have that exemption, that embarrassment, that shameful piece of law that is being pushed through the Knesset by our legislators. I mean, how much of a slap in the face is one person expected to just sit by and say, sure, keep it coming? I mean, this is not normal.
No, and I think I'm glad that we're having this discussion, because I think it is really important for people outside of Israel to hear about the reality of this dynamic. And, even though we need to defend the country, of course, and ensure that we're secure, there's a lot of anxiety and concern about the way in which we're doing things now. And people, again, are being asked to go up and, frankly, put their lives at risk, because there will be a casualty toll, and it won't be low if it's an all-out combat, conflict, confrontation in the Gaza Strip with a well-armed adversary and many of whose fighters just don't fear death. So there was something else really interesting as the discussion about going back into Gaza arose, sort of late last week and then peaked over the weekend. Our new IDF Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, he's had a few sort of tense spots already with the Prime Minister and with members of the coalition. In particular, I'm thinking of Bezalel Smotrich. But the government is saying the primary goal is to destroy Hamas, to take control of Gaza. And it depends on which minister speaking, how much control, exactly where and how, but that is a word, as is the word occupation. Those are words that are being used not infrequently now. Yeah. The other issue, of course, is the hostages and the rescue and repatriation of those poor hostages still languishing in captivity. And Eyal Zamir, the chief of staff, said recently, that's the primary goal of this operation, is to bring them home. And he was rebuked publicly by Bezalel Smotrich. This is not a good sign. And Smotrich also said something to the effect that, if you aren't going to execute our orders, adhere to our directives, we can replace you.
I have a lot to say on this, and I'll take it in two different directions. First of all, look, what we are seeing when it comes to what Zamir said about the priority being the hostages and the release, and then the government saying that's not the priority. The priority is the elimination of Hamas. And of course, then Smotrich even clarifying that and saying, listen, we're going in long term. And if there's even a deal, we're not stopping. So basically, if it's Smotrich has his way, the moment the IDF expands this operation, bye-bye hostages, right? We just don't care anymore. So that shows a deep dispute that I think has risen above surface and shows the discrepancy and the arguments that are taking place behind these closed doors. Okay, what should we be prioritizing, right? And I think from the army, it doesn't surprise me that they're the ones who are pushing the hostages, because I think they're looking at what is possible. So these army guys aren't stupid. They know that their ability is only so much what it can achieve, right? So it can push Hamas to a point that it feels on the brink and it will want to make a deal. That they can do. They can push Hamas to the point that it is weakened and degraded to the point that someone else can come in and grab the reins and take control of Gaza. But they don't want to. If you look at Zamir, he's been quite consistent. He says hostages priority. I don't want my soldiers distributing humanitarian aid in Gaza, right? Why not? Why not? Because he doesn't want the long-term so-called occupation of Gaza. Smotrich, on the other hand, says to him, no, you're going to do what we're going to tell you to do. And if you don't like it, get the hell out of here. We'll bring someone else instead of you. That's because Smotrich has a whole different vision of what he views the military's role here is. So you really see very clearly these two different, very opposed views of military use, of the role of military, and what's possible. But the second thing that I'll just say, and this deeply troubles me also, is when I hear ministers say, well, we'll just replace you. They got rid of Houthis and America. They made it clear to him, the former chief of staff, that he's no longer wanted. They got rid of Ronen Bar. He has yet to step down, the head of the Shin Bet, but he's announced mid-June he's going. And that was after the whole tug of war that he played with Netanyahu and the high courts, etc. They got rid of the head of military intelligence and the head of the Southern Command. Everyone's going, but none of them have gone. Not a one, right? They got rid of the defense minister who they didn't like, Yoav Gallant, but they themselves don't move. So when convenient for them, it's the chief of staff to blame and it's the head of the Shabak to blame. But when it's not convenient for them, then they say, well, no, we make the decisions. So which way is it, guys? If you make the decisions, you're to blame. And if you don't make the decisions, then I can understand. Then we should listen to the army, maybe. I mean, this government is just really, at the end of the day, it's hard to say the worst because, someone could say, well, no, those guys back in 1953 were worse. I don't know. But in my lifetime, the worst.
And Prime Minister Netanyahu, as he always does, just manages to stay on his tightrope, let them duke it out, and he doesn't get too far into the muck. He let that kind of, frisson between Zamir and Smotrich be them. He did say to Zamir, it's fine. The cabinet minister can ask questions, and then we decide. There can be disagreements, but he's not supporting Zamir overtly, is he?
No, he's not supporting Zamir, and he's not giving him, listen, they wanted Zamir. They appointed Zamir, right? Suddenly Zamir's the best thing since apple pie, and now they don't want Zamir.
Yeah, for 5 minutes he was. For 5 minutes he was.
It's exactly for 5 minutes. He had that he could enjoy that. Netanyahu is the champion of never getting his hands dirty and never having to take responsibility for something. When it's convenient, he's the king. When it's not convenient, he didn't know about it, right? On a whole other note, but if you looked at those fires that were taking place outside of Jerusalem, that really caused a lot of damage, and has to be said, by Latrun and really big Shemesh area. If you notice, Netanyahu, right away when the first fire started, a few days before the really big one that was on Yom HaZikaron, he went straight away to the front command center. And then, of course, on Yom HaZikaron, he went straight away as well. He's learned from the experience of trying to stay away from things and not taking, he wants to be front. He wants to be there. He wants to be seen as I'm in charge and I'm running the show, because he doesn't need another October 7th, right?
No, he doesn't. But in the meantime, Action Man has yet to find an hour to head out to near Oz, kibbutz near Oz.
No, and he won't. He'll never go there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Because that's a bad photo.
The place where 1 out of 4 of the residents were either murdered or taken hostages on October 7th.
And where Sagi Dekohen, one of the hostages who was released in February, spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu, one of the few hostages who would do that, and said, I really want you to come with me. No cameras, just come. And apparently he made a non-committal affirmative commitment, which means he'll never go.
Exactly.
I'm going to just throw out something crazy, which is Eyal Zamir is the chief of staff of the IDF. He's got his hands full with many things, but one of them is of his fighting force. And he's got soldiers in the Gaza Strip who are alive and being tortured. And the soldiers he's putting in there tomorrow need to know that their chief of staff and their country will do everything possible to rescue them. Do you think that that's lurking or a factor in Zamir stepping up and saying, getting the hostages back is a priority, full stop?
I think it's part of it. I think that, when you think about the really ethical dilemma that exists here, and there is one, what we're facing now, for example, with the Houthis and that missile that they fired that hit Ben Gurion Airport on Sunday. If we end this war with Hamas still standing and still in charge and still able to rebuild, it'll be a matter of years that they'll have missiles like that can hit Ben Gurion Airport again. I mean, that's just the fact of life here. So that reality can't be ignored, right? This isn't just black and white. But there's no question that Israel does have an ethos of bringing everyone home. And these people were abandoned. The vast majority, there's just a handful of soldiers there. Everyone else are civilians out of the 59. Soldiers, you could say, okay, that's their job. They're sent to the front lines. They know the danger. Well, someone who's sleeping in their home in Nir Oz or who goes to a Nova Music Festival, well,
right,
they don't think they're going to be taken hostage. That's the government that abandoned them. That just compounds the commitment, I think, and obligation to bring them back. And I think that Zamir recognizes that ethos is currently being shattered. I think that you and I recognize, I think most Israelis recognize that. And I think for that reason, we also know, and you and I have spoken about this a lot over the last 18 months, is that as a nation, we need to go through a healing process. And we will not be able to heal as long as people are still being held in Gaza. And that's going to be hard. And for a nation not to be able to heal, so the war could be over. We could have peace treaties with the Saudis and who knows what. But if you're still holding on to a couple of our people in Gaza, that's going to be something that's going to be on our minds and piercing our hearts every single day.
Yeah, I don't think that, I know that in the Prime Minister's office, there is a prevailing view that there's a hat trick that they've been chasing, destroy Hamas, push Hezbollah north of the Litani, and make peace, normalization with Saudi Arabia, and that will magically alter Benjamin Netanyahu's legacy in history. And I happen to disagree. I don't think anything will ever alter or erase the impact of October 7th. Not a deal with, even with the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic would do that. I just think that
what you just said, Viv, is also, I think, why he clings to power right now.
Right.
Because he knows that his legacy now is October 7th. And with the war ending, let's say there's going to be, let's hope there will be a deal. The hostages will come back. There'll be some new entity that will take over Gaza. But without some dramatic change here, something, I don't know, Iran gives up all its nuclear program, makes peace with Israel, the Saudis anything beyond something massive like that, Netanyahu will always now be remembered for being the man who was the prime minister on October 7th, but I would even say more than that, was the person who set all the policies for pretty much 15 years preceding October 7th. So this was his doing to a large extent.
There's a lot being made of, the fact that Herzi Halevi and Ronen Bar, the head of Shabak, didn't phone Benjamin Netanyahu in the middle of the night early on October 7th in the morning to say, hey, boss, we may have a big problem here. But as you point out, the whole kind of containment strategy called the conceptia in Hebrew, which is keep them happy, keep the Qatari money flowing in, give them work permits. Hamas just wants a nice and quiet, normal life for their people. I got this. And that was his approach. That was his idea, or he's certainly taking credit for it. And that was the basis for the opening for October 7th. Okay, but we've got just a few minutes left, and I just want to mention before we go to the Houthis briefly that the government, of course, is saying, hey, Hamas, we're coming in, and we're coming in like firing like mad. But if you release all the hostages within the next week, 10 days, whatever the deadline is they've given, then we don't have to begin this offensive. And I think that we probably agree that the likelihood of Hamas doing that is less than zero. But who knows?
Exactly.
Sometimes miracles happen. But I don't think that Hamas has anything to lose from their perspective. They don't care if the hostages die.
No, and I think that at this point also, all eyes really are going to be on Donald Trump. He's coming to the region in just about a week and a half. He's going to be going to Saudi, Doha, Qatar, and the UAE. And if he comes here and he says, listen, guys, wrap it up, it's done. And by the way, if you're listening to the statements he's been making over the last few days, talking a lot about the people of Gaza who are suffering, starving, need food, those are comments that he's making. You might be getting some indication of where his thinking is going at the moment. And the security officials in Israel are already saying that this ramping up of the operation, nothing's going to happen, though, until he finishes up his visit here to the region. So if that's really the case, then just maybe all this bluster is about really adding the pressure to Hamas, Trump coming, clinching the deal, and hopefully we get back the people. But let's see.
Oh, wouldn't that be something? All right. We got to go to Yemen quickly.
We can't. There's no airport in Yemen anymore. We can't go there.
Well, we're going to have, maybe they'll build one, a floating pier.
A floating
runway.
Yes, our good friends, the Houthis, the Houthim.
Yeah. It's a great name, I have to say. Yes, our good friends, the Houthis, seem to have some very powerful ballistic missiles that also seem to have pretty precise aim.
Look, the missile that landed on Sunday, I think, is still unclear exactly what kind of missile it was. It's obviously a ballistic missile. It's a kind that it's a version that is provided to the Houthis by the Iranians. I have seen some chatter about the possibility of some hypersonic gliding missile. There's some U.S. congressmen who have been spreading this, claiming that they have intelligence information. I don't know. We do know that the Arrow, which is an Israeli-made system, and THAAD, which is an American-made system, which are both deployed here in the region and in Israel, have been effective until now in really intercepting almost every single Houthi missile, over 95% interception rate. You know, just to give by comparison, Shabbat morning here in Jerusalem, 6:30, we woke up to sirens because of a Houthi missile. And my wife is like, Yaakov, we got to go down to the bomb shelter. I'm like, nah, it's the Houthis. Why do you go to the bomb shelter? They always intercept and it's too early. I got to go back to sleep. Well, we went down, and you know what? After what happened on Sunday when that rocket and that missile landed in Ben Gurion Airport, I'll tell you, I'll be moving to that bomb shelter, you know, next time I hear that siren. But was it a new missile that outsmarted our missile defense systems, or was this some sort of one-off technical malfunction of the missile defense systems? Maybe some problem with the interceptor, with the detection. Who knows what it is? That's being looked into. We're not going to have answers for that very quickly. These things do take time. But what we are seeing, and this is important, is Israel for the last couple of months has really taken a step back and has given the Americans the front stage when it comes to the Houthis. And under Operation, I forget what it's called, Rough something, they have attacked over 1,000 targets since mid-March. And the U.S. military has tried really hard to degrade the Houthis' capability. But look, they can still fire missiles. I mean, you know, so someone said to me, but I understand if they've attacked so much and they're still able to fire missiles, so what's the answer? So I said, well, unless you want us to put boots on the ground, right, which nobody's going to do, the Americans aren't doing it, and Israel, we're not sending troops to Yemen, you're going to keep on doing what this is, which is taking away assets, trying to explain to them it's not in their interest, and trying to exact a price. What Israel bombed on Monday, the Hudaydah port and other, a cement factory and other assets and sites throughout Yemen, that's one thing. But what they did on Tuesday, bombing the Sana'a International Airport, and not just bombing the runway, but the terminal and airplanes and the runway. There is no longer a Sana'a International Airport. That is, sending a very clear message. Now, will the Houthis understand that? I'm skeptical, to be honest. I don't think that they are a rational actor. I don't think that they understand those terms. They are a proxy of Iran. They are provided the capabilities by the Iranians. And their sole objective and role is to continue to wreak havoc here in the region, to attack Israel, and to disrupt shipping lines through the Red Sea. So will they continue to attack Israel? Maybe. And is it possible that really the lesson here is we need to teach the Iranians a lesson, and they have to know that they don't have immunity? I got to say, that's where I'm thinking.
Yeah, that seems to be the prevailing view, is we don't have fantastic intelligence, I understand, with respect to Yemen. The terrorists there, the Houthis, are kind of burrowed and hidden in mountainous areas, tough to get to. And they are, at the end of the day, run by, supplied by, supported by Iran. And so we just kind of keep, avoiding the elephant in the room. But that's an issue for Netanyahu and Trump to work out. Trump may have to come to understand that he's not going to make his great deal in the Tehran bazaar, and there's going to have to be some different solution to the Iran problem going forward. I just want to, I don't think that people living in other countries would understand how significant the airport is. We have Ben Gurion International Airport, which is our main airport. It's where probably 98% of commercial flights go in and out, private jets. And it's a very critical supply and contact route for Israel. And when it's cut off, we're very cut off. And we had that experience for one day during the war in 2014 when President Obama was in the Oval Office. The United States, the Transportation Safety Authority, declared Ben Gurion unsafe for commercial flights. The ban was lifted one day later. But what that did was really lit a fire here. And as you're aware, it's called Ilan Ramon Airport in Eilat, named after, of course, the Israeli astronaut who died in space. The Ilan Ramon Airport in Eilat is an international airport. And it was built to those specs precisely to avoid a calamity where Ben Gurion was hit or declared to be unsafe. So we would still have a functioning international airport in Eilat. Far less convenient, but allows us to remain connected to the outside world. But I don't think people understand. They probably think, oh, Israel's so small. Well, yeah, we're small and we're also very vulnerable.
Yeah, and I mean, you see what happened after that one missile landed. Almost every foreign airline has canceled flights, and many of them...
Can't blame them.
Yeah, I don't blame them either.
You won't be able to get insurance either. That's the real problem.
Yeah, I mean, United had originally canceled until Friday. Now they've extended it by a couple of days. British Airways, I think, is now canceled till June, or some other airline till June. I mean, this is a big blow to Israel, to blow to tourism, that if there ever thought, well, if there ever was a hope that it would come back, and to the Israeli consumer who was looking forward to traveling maybe this summer, when I was going to cost them a fortune to get a ticket and get on a plane.
Absolutely. So I guess we're kind of all going to sit, as usual, on the edge of our seat, waiting for President Trump to come, waiting to see what the outcome is of that visit. But I think it will be significant. Hopefully he'll pull another rabbit out of his hat and make that deal and get all of those men home to their families and
Please,
out
God.
of that. Yaakov, thank you as always for your time, for your thoughts.
It's great to be with you, Vivian.
Great to see you. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you, Yaakov.
Thanks.
Within minutes of finishing that interview with Yaakov last night, my daughter in Toronto sent me a message saying Trump administration has agreed to stop attacking the Houthis in Yemen, and in return, the Houthis have agreed to end all attacks on commercial shipping in the region. And my reaction was, no, it can't be. I just got off with Yaakov, and neither one of us had heard anything about it, and it sounded kind of far out. Turns out that within minutes of finishing with Yaakov, I shortly after received a news bulletin saying, holy cow, Trump administration has agreed to stop attacking the Houthis in Yemen. And in return, of course, the Houthis will no longer attack shipping lanes. But at the same time, the Houthis also pledged to continue attacking Israel directly. So as you can imagine, that set Israeli leadership back on its heels, as is being reported in the media, and not in a good way. So I want to just close out now with the Houthi flag, which is now up on the screen. And I will read you out and translate what the flag says. Here are the lines from the Houthi flag. God is great. Death to America. Death to Israel. A curse upon the Jews. And finally, victory to Islam. That, in a nutshell, is the Houthi ideology. And they're serious. Thanks, as always, for being here. Until next time. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to hello@stateoftelaviv.com. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Jan Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team. Thanks to you for being here. We'll be back soon.